Okay, welcome everyone. I think we'll go ahead and get started. This is the National External Diploma Program, or NEDP, in New Mexico webinar. We're excited to go over all of the information we have to share with you today. We've been planning it for a long time, and there's actually the whole NEDP process in New Mexico is many years in the making. So we've been waiting for several years now to have this webinar. My name is Amber Gallup Rodriguez. I'm the Director of Adult Education at the New Mexico Higher Education Department. I'll be our facilitator today. And we're joined by several other panelists. The first one being Elaine Perea of the Public Education Department. Elaine, would you introduce yourself and say anything about your program you'd like to?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elaine Perea, and I am the Director of College and Career Readiness at the Public Education Department, which is the K-12 side of education. And as the Director of College and Career Readiness, I oversee a variety of career technical education programs and college acceleration programs like advanced placement and dual credit. So we've been pleased to be able to partner with the Higher Education Department in bringing this program to fruition. And I'm just very excited to be here to tell you about it today, and glad to have your attention for this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine. Margaret, could you introduce yourself?
Thank you very much, Amber. I'm Margaret Kirkpatrick, and I am the NEDP Director. We are very pleased to have this opportunity to speak with you today and look forward to a long time of working with you to bring NEDP to New Mexico and to your agencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Janita?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Janita McNamara, the NEDP National Training Specialist, and I'm very excited to meet all of you today and show you around our program.
Thank you, Janita. And Mitch.
Hey, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Mitch Rosen. I'm the National NEDP Consultant, and I'm thrilled to be here after 5 years of getting this through the legislature and bringing a new program for diploma completion to the good residents of New Mexico.
Thanks, Mitch. And Tina, could you introduce yourself and talk about your role?
Sure. I'm Tina Height. I am the Professional Development Coordinator for Adult Education for New Mexico, and Propel is the name of our program. And I am going to be in the background moderating, watching your questions come in. If you have any technical things, please let me know and I can help you out. We will not be using the chat today. Instead, please use the Q&A button. If you have a question, I will be moderating those questions and presenting them to the presenters as appropriate. And then if you would like to say something and you want to be unmuted, please raise your hand, wait until you are acknowledged, and then we will ask you to unmute so that you can speak. And by raising your hand, I do mean that you will use the icon in the bottom bar. So you should be muted as you came in. So if you look at that bottom bar, there is a hand and it says raise hand. So just do that. And I noticed that we did have somebody raise their hand. Is that somebody who would like to, was that Isabella? Would you like to speak? And maybe not. I'm no longer seeing raised hands. So, oh, we have a raised hand. Now that is, I'm having an issue here. Why can I not? I'm sorry, this is my first time doing this. Isabel, please, you are unmuted. Or you may unmute.
I'm muted.
No, you're unmuted.
Yeah, I was trying to spell something in the chat, but I couldn't.
Right, the chat is not available. So if you have a question, please use the Q&A button rather than the chat.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Isabel.
Great, thank you so much, Tina. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, like she said, you can use the Q&A. If you have any technical problems or concerns during the webinar, you can also try Tina at Tina N, that's TINAN at unm.edu. And she might be able to assist you that way if you're having any kinds of difficulties. So those are our panelists, and just quickly our agenda for today. We've just gone over our introductions and our technical tips for the webinar. Next, we're going to hear from Margaret, Janita, and Mitch about the NEDP and just letting us know what it is and what it can do for students in New Mexico, adult students in New Mexico. Then we're going to turn to some details on specifically on the NEDP rollout in New Mexico, our plans for the future and how you might want to get involved. And then we're going to have a lot of time for questions and answers with webinar attendees. So you are welcome, as Tina said, to put your questions into the Q&A button now, but we may or may not get to them until the Q&A part. It sort of depends, and I'll depend on Tina to let us know if we should pause to answer some questions that are relevant to the section we're working on, or whether we should just move on through. So until the very end. So please hold on. Excuse me. Please hold on until if you have a question, it's in the Q&A. Please just hold on. If we don't get to you during the presentation, we definitely will afterwards. So with that, I'm going to transition right over to our NEDP specialists here, Margaret, Janita, and Mitch. And I'll stop my share.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate this opportunity, and I look forward to really giving you this NEDP overview. This is going to be a rather big picture overview that we're going to be sharing today. I would also say that I'm going to be at the New Mexico Adult Education Conference talking about NEDP there. I will have a table and be glad to speak with anyone there who is interested for more information. But we're going to be talking about the basics of it today. So what is it exactly? And one of the things that I would like to talk about when I talk about the definition of NEDP is also to talk about really what it isn't. So first of all, the National External Diploma Program is a pathway to a high school diploma, but it is not an instructional program in itself. It is an applied performance assessment pathway. That is, it gives adults and out-of-school youth an opportunity to demonstrate the skills that they have, and by building a portfolio through a series of tasks that parallel what they do and need to know and interact with in their daily life. So this is an opportunity for all of those students that you see in your program that you know have skills, but really don't have the time to sit through a long seat-based program to accrue credit, or who don't have perhaps test-taking skills. They have the skill of knowledge, but not the ability to take some of those timed tests that lead to the diploma or the equivalency. So the NEDP provides them another pathway to in the case of New Mexico, the state diploma. NEDP has been around for quite a while. It was developed as a result of some of the original research on how adults learn. And we know that adults learn by having control of what they think is necessary in their learning program, by having control over the timing of their learning program, by seeing a reason to have these things presented to them, by seeing a reason for what they are working on. So all of these adult learning theories resulted in the development of what at that time was called the EDP, the External Diploma Program, later became the National External Diploma Program. It has been validated twice by the Department of Education, once in 1979 for national dissemination, and again in 2020, when NEDP was selected as an innovative practice in the first round of Advancing Innovations in Adult Education. If we look at the characteristics of NEDP, we find that it is very much focused on life and work skills, and this makes it valuable for our adult learners. By the way, we call them clients, not students, since this is not an instructional program. But the work that they do, the tasks that they work on, are the kinds of things that they need to know and to be able to successfully navigate in their adult life. For example, working on credit cards, on job applications, on developing cover letters for their job applications. These sorts of things are the way that our adult clients demonstrate their academic skills. The program is self-paced and flexible. It is, in fact, a largely distance education program. Our clients work on their own on a certain amount of work and then periodically meet with their NEDP staff person, their assessor, once every week or 2 weeks for a proctored session where we can ensure that we know who's actually doing the work. But all of the work is done online, and they submit their work online, and then the meetings with their assessors can either be done face-to-face or they can also be done remotely. NEDP has the advantage of being able to be an entirely remote program, or it can include some face-to-face interactions with the clients, depending upon how the program is working for each individual client. We find it especially appropriate for second language speakers and those who learn differently, not that it is of any less rigor, but because the kinds of accommodations that are very often necessary or really useful for these clients are built into the program. That is, being able to be in a quiet place if that's the necessary accommodation that can make them work successfully. Having extended time, being able to choose some of their own resources. All of those sorts of things are built into the program. NEDP is not a passive program, but in fact really requires learner engagement and encourages self-efficacy and problem solving and time management, all of those kinds of soft skills. And at the end of the program, they will be awarded the, the New Mexico Diploma. The kinds of skills that are offered in the context of NEDP, the foundational skills, of course, since NEDP is leading to a diploma, reading, writing, listening, speaking, math, information and communication technology, media literacy, all of these skills are woven throughout the fiber of the NEDP program at an appropriate level of difficulty. I do apologize for my voice. Work readiness skills are really threaded throughout the program, beginning in the very first part, where our clients begin to look at their own career development and look at what are job opportunities within their geographical area. By the end of the program, they will have worked on resume development, on a job search, on interpersonal skills and organizational awareness. And of course, those skills that are really not part of a checklist that the client can check off, but we know are really so important for clients to be successful in the next stage of their program, whether that's going on to higher level training, post-secondary education, going on in their own career, but learning to learn, problem solving, critical analysis, personal responsibility, self-awareness and self-direction, all of those soft skills which we know are so important in an adult's life. All of these skills are integral parts of the NEDP program. So who would be our clients? Our clients really are going to be self-directed learners who can work independently with certainly guidance and support from their NEDP staff, but the majority of the work is done independently. We're looking for mature adults with life experience that can help them be successful in this new program. So we can look at their work history and the skills that came from that. their training programs, and their interest in post-secondary education. One of the things that we know about adults in a high school diploma now is that they are different from youth, in that youth are in high school programs because that's what they are supposed to be doing. That's what a child who is 15, 16, or 17 is expected. That's where they're expected to be in their high school program. But we know that adults are in this program because they need it in order to do something else. They need a high school diploma in order to go to post-secondary, or in order to get a better job, or in order to keep their job. So we can build on this experience that they have and help them plan for their next steps. NEDP clients also demonstrate personal responsibility and problem solving. At the beginning of the program, these are important skills, but certainly they are strengthened throughout the program. And then they are able to achieve our cut scores on reading, writing, and math CASAS instruments. So where might you look for NEDP clients, potential clients in your own program? Well, you might look for high school students who you know have skills. NEDP would then be an option if the test itself was the barrier, because we know that the high school equivalency exams do require high-level skills, but for some students, a test is just a barrier that they find very, very difficult to surmount. So those students might be potential NEDP clients. Credit completion students who come in perhaps with 0 or very few credits, and they're looking at a 2 or a 3-year program. NEDP, we find, takes about 6 to 9 months in order for a client to reach a graduation completion level. And another place might be advanced ELL students who want a credential, but again, who might not be good candidates for a test. Again, having the skills, but a test itself being a barrier. So what could our clients see as outcomes, and what can we see as outcomes from our clients? I said that it's a non-instructional program, but it doesn't mean that the clients don't acquire skills really through the course of working on the tasks that they will be working on. So for example, when they're working on their credit card tasks, they learn a lot about figuring out interest rates and the sort of math that's required to get a real picture of what a credit card means. They're evaluated against a criterion of mastery, not against each other. And we go to a great deal of effort to make sure that we have a national standard of completion, so that we can say that a client in California and a client in New Mexico and a client in Virginia all achieve the same level of mastery, where they're able to have incremental progress instead of relying on an all or nothing exam. Every time they complete a task to 100% mastery, they never have to redo that task. They only ever have to work on work on items that were not completed to 100% mastery. They have the flexibility to work at the same time they are completing this high school program. So they could be a part of an IET, an integrated education and training program. And again, they do earn the state diploma. There are 3 parts to the program: the diagnostic phase, generalized assessment, and the individualized assessment in college and career competency. The first part of the program is where they really become familiar with the elements of NEDP. The second part is generalized assessment, where they build their portfolio. And then the third is the individualized assessment, where they have a special competency that helps them plan for their next steps. And now I'm going to turn it over to Janita.
Thank you, Margaret. I don't want to read everything on this very text-heavy slide, but I want to give you a sense of what's happening in both of these 2 main phases of NEDP. So the diagnostic phase happens first as the client enrolls in the program. And in that diagnostic phase, we are doing 7 instruments. 3 of them are reading, writing, and math proctored instruments that we use just to make sure that our incoming clients' reading, writing, and math skills are high enough to do the work that's coming in the program. If we have someone who's, operating at a math level of 4th or 5th grade, this program is going to be way too difficult for them. So these are kind of entry-level scores to get into and begin working in the program that show their readiness. But in addition to those, we're also going to investigate what brings you into the program at this point in your life. What's your goal? What is your work history? We're going to find a way to give our clients credit, either for the work, the training, the education, the experience they bring into the program, or to help them prepare for what's coming next in their lives, what the NEDP is really gearing them up to do. We're also going to give them a chance to self-assess their own baseline abilities on all the competencies on which their performance will be measured, and on their technology skills coming into the program. And they'll do an occupational interest profiler. This is the ONED. It's a Department of Labor tool. Many of you may be familiar with it, but we're doing this so that we can use it later on in generalized assessment in the 21st century workplace competency area. When a client has shown that their reading, writing, and math skills are strong enough to do the work in the program, and they've completed the other instruments, they begin generalized assessment. And in generalized assessment, our client is focusing on just 1 or 2 areas at a time. And if you look at the names of these areas, health literacy, civic literacy, consumer awareness, and so on, you'll note that for the most part, these are not traditional high school subjects. And that's by design. We really want to be able to measure the high school level skills of an adult within the context of real life and the world of work. So the work they'll be doing, the reading and writing and speaking and listening and digital literacy skills and critical thinking, all of those skills that we're measuring in NEDP, we're measuring against the backdrop of adult life and adult work. And in addition, a portfolio reviewer, a second set of eyes, as you'll see written on the bottom of the slide, will review all of the work in the program. After the assessor has said it demonstrates, a second person will look at it and verify demonstration. And that's how we know that the standard of completion is very, very high in NEDP. So we can really say for sure that an adult learner who has earned a high school credential through this program is in fact someone who has the skills of a high school graduate. So the NEDP system, as Margaret said, is entirely online. So we're going to go on. I'm going to share my screen if I may, and take a look at what the program actually looks like. I feel that this is one of the most illustrative things we can do. Can you see my screen? I lost
We're not seeing your screen.
I'm sorry?
We are not seeing your screen.
Not seeing my screen. Let's try it again. Now you can see it. Yes? Okay, excellent. So we are on T-Trainer. T-Trainer is our simulated NEDP site. It looks just like the real NEDP. It operates just like the real NEDP, but it has pretend clients and pretend client data in there. So we're not going to break anyone's heart or mess up our data as we use this to practice and learn. So if I go into my pretend clients, you'll see that all of the NEDP data I need, including the demographic information, the results of the diagnostic scores, and all of the client work is all here in the system. For the sake of training, we've opened all of the competency areas at one time, all 8 of the areas, but in real life, we would never open up that much for one client at once. That would be totally overwhelming. But the way that the system is designed is that we begin with some lower depth of knowledge activities, a lot of kind of look into the resource that we provide for you, find the proper answer, plug it into the box, and it's right or wrong. And we're starting off with that fairly simple work. Again, by design, we really want our clients to build some momentum, build some confidence, and learn how to navigate around the program right at the beginning by not giving them work that's just so difficult to handle. But then we can scaffold that and start to build more and more complex activities as the client moves through the portfolio. So what I'd like to show you are two activities, if I can get them both in before we run out of time. One in about the middle of the program and one toward the end. In consumer awareness, which is about the middle of the client's program, we're getting into the competencies of a consumer. And this is obviously where we get into a lot of math work. So I know I just went really quickly, but we're going to look at credit cards. All of the competencies in the program begin with an overview. And the overview is intended to answer that classic adult ed question. I know most of you come from an adult ed classroom, so you've been asked this question, as have I. Why do I need to know this? When am I ever going to use this? The overview makes the case for why an adult needs to know this, why this is an adult appropriate skill. And also it gives a brief description of what the clients will do at home in activities, which they do independently on their own, anywhere they have internet access. And it tells the client what they're going to be asked to do in the proctored in-office checks. And as Margaret discussed, those in-office checks are the proctored kind of rubber hits the road meetings where we know that the person who's seeking a diploma is in fact the person who has mastered these skills in the program. In-office checks can be done, as the name implies, in the office with you, or it can be done over a platform like Zoom. We've developed a way to be able to launch and proctor remote in-office checks over Zoom. So if you have a client who can't make it into the office, who's got transportation or childcare barriers, or just is geographically very far separated from your office, you can do this program entirely remotely. If you have people who can come into your programs and do the in-office checks with you in the room, that's fine as well. You really have the ability to do it either way, depending on the needs of your clients. So let's go into the first activity. Most of the activities in NEDP include at least one resource that we're providing for our clients. And those resources are either a PDF, or in some cases, it's a website that we've vetted and determined that it has the information that the clients need. That way, everyone's looking at the same information. So in this case, we've got a credit card, how to read your credit card resource. And it goes over the main components that you would see on a credit card statement with descriptions of those components. And our clients would apply this information to the work in the activity. So there's going to be a simulated activity where they look at another statement that's very similar to the one in the PDF and answer questions about the components. And then we're going to get into some math. So there's an embedded calculator in every math competency that the client can use if they need to. There are also tutorials for all of the discrete math and digital literacy skills embedded in this tab. So as Margaret said, this is not an instructional program, meaning that the NEDP staff is not the teacher of the NEDP client. We're the assessor, not the teacher. But that does not mean there's not a lot of learning going on. The learning is going on through kind of interpreting the information and using the information in the resources, viewing the tutorials, demonstrating work, reattempting things that are incorrect and incomplete. So there's definitely a lot of learning going on, even though I'm not the client's teacher. So if a client didn't know how to calculate credit card interest charges, they could view this video or read the transcript. Then they can go back into the activity. And here we introduce an equation. So is there algebra in NEDP? Yes, there is. But the algebra is not that strictly academic solve for X kind of algebra. We're introducing the use of variables and algebraic equations as it applies to a consumer topic here, which of course is calculating the interest rates on a credit card. So our client would do this work. They would figure out this equation using Juana's information above. They would put their answer in this field. And then when we come in to assess later, all we have to do is click on this pop-up box. And the pop-up box gives us the required response. I don't have to have an answer key or a teacher's manual or anything like that. It's all embedded right within the program. So I would look at the answer. I would say, yes, it demonstrates mastery. It's correct and complete. I'll mark it as D. I'll save it, and it's right. If it were incorrect, as 2B is, our client said $2.09. She's a penny off, it's 208, but that's not close enough. We're going to have to mark that as not demonstrated. In that case, because I'm not the client's instructor, I could still leave a procedural note for my client letting them know something like, It appears that your process is correct, right? She's so close that it makes you think she's doing this the right way. It appears that your process is correct. You might want to double check your rounding. Something procedural like that is not providing content instruction, but it helps to lead my client to, okay, now I have a better idea of what I need to do when I reattempt this work. Clients can reattempt the work as many times as it takes until they get to 100% mastery. So a few other things I just want to point out to you in credit cards. I know we're limited on time, but I like this table at the bottom of the activity. It gives a pretend person who has an interest rate on their credit card of 12.99%, and it asks us to calculate, asks our clients to calculate the interest rates on these average daily balances. And then it simulates the experience where a client incurs or someone incurs a penalty rate because they didn't pay their bill. So the rate goes up to 22.99%. Okay, so what does that look like in terms of dollars and cents? Because clients don't always understand, unless they have to really dig into it, what the difference is in terms of actual money if their interest rate goes up. And when we assess this, it's very simple. We just open our pop-up box and the answers are there. That activity is done at home independently, as all activities are, but the skills that are measured in that activity and practiced in that activity, the client will see again here in the proctored in-office check. In the in-office check, we remind them of the equation, we give them a similar table, and they figure out the math, the interest rates, charges in that table based on the rates. Okay, if we have time, I'd like to look at one other thing. Do we have time? Give me a thumbs up or something.
I think we have time, yeah.
Okay, I'll try to make it quick. Geography and history is toward the end of the program. By this time, we've got some very savvy adult learners. They know their way around the program. They know how to do their own research. They've built PowerPoint presentations. They've made oral presentations that they've delivered and have recorded. They've done a lot of work, and now we're going to culminate some of that in a local geography activity. So in this one, basically the overview is that our clients will select a geographic feature of their state or region, and they'll talk about how that geographic feature impacts the economy in their area. Again, they're activities that they do at home. In this case, we give them some resources to get them started, but they're going to need to do some research on their own, and they're going to need to cite their sources using APA guidelines. They've practiced doing that by now. They know how to do it. In case they've forgotten, there's always a plagiarism and citation guideline that they can access if they need it. So we're just going to walk them through, what's the geographic feature, what's the economic sector it impacts, how does the employment activity impact the people who live in the area, cite your sources, and so on. In the second activity, their answers are transferred over and they begin to work on a presentation. They can use PowerPoint, they can use Google Slides, they can actually use any presentation software that can be uploaded into the NEDP system. So they're going to put together a PowerPoint presentation, making that high-level connection between the economic sector that's impacted by the geographic feature. And then we're going to ask them to start to practice an oral presentation that will be guided by the slides they've created. And very importantly, here and in many places in NEDP, we tell our clients exactly how their work will be assessed. When you come into the in-office check, we want you to know what to expect. We want you to know how you're going to be evaluated. No surprises. We're not playing gotcha games in NEDP. Adult learners perform best when they know what the expectations are. I know I perform much better that way myself. So we think that's only fair. And you'll notice that these evaluation criteria are exactly the criteria that you see in the evaluation pop-up box where we assess our client's work. So once we get into the in-office check, the client has uploaded their slides. We are able to start recording an oral presentation where the client kind of talks us through the slide deck that they've created, and then we can go ahead and evaluate that separately. We don't evaluate with our client in the room, but we'll go in and evaluate it on the criteria that the client was able to practice and prepare for. So that's a very quick overview Of 2 of the competencies that you'll see, there are about 70 or so in the entire portfolio, but we chunk them up, in competency areas so that the client can make incremental progress toward their ultimate graduation. There is no end of course test. Once they finish those initial tests in the diagnostic phase that show that their reading, writing, and math are strong enough to do the work in the program, they don't do any more tests. They don't do any more multiple choice questions at all, actually, and they don't have anything else that's timed. So it really gives adult learners a chance to stretch their legs, kind of relax into this information, and learn things that are going to be relevant to their lives. All right, thank you.
I just got one more slide that I'd like to present. And this one, my computer is kind of having issues today. It keeps flickering. And so I'm hoping that nothing goes wrong while I'm doing this little bit of work right here. But this gives you both the benefits of NEDP, that it is a nationally recognized diploma option. We're in 9 states right now. It is aligned to the CCR standards. We allow the clients to fulfill their adult responsibilities while they're continuing to work, and they really see a relevance. The next slide has the contact information. So I know we've been having some questions, and I've been answering a few as we've gone through, and I will continue to look at the to look at the questions as I'm sure will Janita as we go through. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret and Janita. One moment here, and I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. Oops. 1 second. Okay, so thinking about next steps within New Mexico, I wanted to give just a quick overview, just for general information about the authorization process that the state went through. And I know that Mitch in the beginning here mentioned a 5-year process that he undertook. And I've only been here for 1 year. So Mitch, could you tell us a little bit about what happened in those previous ones?
Sure. I'm going to do my best not to get too policy geeky for everybody. This really began 5-6 years ago with the discussions between HED and PED about the need to have additional pathways for adults to reach the high school diploma completion point in their academic careers. So through working with both the LESC and the LFC over that time period, as well as working with Senator Kernan, Gay Kernan, Mimi Stewart, and Bill Soules in the legislature, we were able to navigate getting the NEDP approved through state legislation and then funded. And just so everybody is aware, and I'll keep this short, there were really several criteria that we wanted to maintain, and some of those Margaret and Janita spoke to. Primarily, it was to ensure that it was aligned to the national standards, the CCRS for adult education. We wanted to make sure that it was a program that was nationally accepted, and OCTAE has, the AFLA organization at the U.S. Department of Ed has validated NEDP multiple times over the last several decades. We wanted to ensure that the students coming out of a program would be eligible for student loans and for community college entrance. So all of those steps were taken care of along the way, which eventually led to HED creating an application process that was open to any organization to submit their pathway to a diploma. And NEDP went through that vetting process and was then selected as meeting all of the criteria that was set forward. Is that a good enough summary for you, Anne?
Yeah, that'll be good. Thanks. That's great. Thank you. I'm sorry, I was just messing around with my presentation. Can you all see the presenter or the?
We see your presenter mode.
You see my presenter mode. All right, just give me one moment.
So I spend my fair share of time testifying before the LESC hearings over the years. And I'm sort of the forward guard of getting NEDP in, and Margaret and Janita are the generals that carry it all forward. But it truly was a wonderful process working with your state legislators who truly understand what adult education needs in terms of alternative pathways. And they were 100% supportive. I was thrilled that it was a bipartisan effort to move this program through. And when it was signed by the governor, we all rejoiced.
Thank you very much. Yeah, actually, I learned something from that as well. So once we went through this process this year, PED and HED formed a committee, 2 folks from HED, 2 folks from PED. And together, that I should say HED is the higher education department, PED is the public education department. We got together, we set requirements based on the law and code that you can see here on my slides. We created an RFA, a request for applications. We posted it on the agency websites for a couple of months. And then we received the NEDP's application. We reviewed it and confirmed that it met the requirements that we set forth in the request for applications. And then as the code stipulates, PED authorized the NEDP as an adult diploma provider for the state of New Mexico, and HED will now implement, which is the beginning of what we're doing here now. I should say that also the legislature appropriated $250,000 to HED for the coming fiscal year. That's fiscal year 23, for the administration of the adult education program. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about how we're going to use those funds to implement NEDP over in New Mexico this year and in coming years and build the program in just a moment. But first, I wanted to talk just a little bit about why we felt in our committee that the NEDP was a good fit for some adult learners in New Mexico. And I want to ask if Lane Perea from the Public Education Department could maybe say a few words about that.
Thank you, Amber. Many of the people on this call are probably aware that graduation rates in New Mexico continue to lag the country's rates, and we have big gaps in our community between what employers need and want from their employees and the educational level of our least prepared adults. So from the Public Education Department's perspective, while we every day working to increase graduation rates and make sure that high school is relevant and engaging so that students stay in school and get the whole high school experience, and that is our #1 priority, we also recognize the reality of the many adults who high school didn't work and they didn't finish, and now they're out in the adult workforce. And for some portion of those people, having a high school diploma would really make a difference. And as you saw in the example of the materials that are being used, the actual things that the clients learn and demonstrate are really relevant to our state in terms of making sure that adults have the proficiencies to be successful in life and in the workforce. And importantly for us as K-12 educators, these people are often either already adults or they are going to be parents, or they're going to be parents. They're adults, they either already have children, they're going to have children. And at some point they're going to be engaging with the K-12 system again as adults. And so we want to make sure that they know the value of a high school diploma for themselves and for their children, so that they can provide the social support, the wraparound supports for their kids, so that their kids can be that first generation high school completer. That really is what moves our state from the low graduations rates up into higher graduation rates. So for the PED, we see it as part of a systemic approach to economic development and to making sure that the taxpayers of New Mexico have access to family supporting wages. And so we're really excited to see the legislation pass.
Thank you, Elaine. And I think, from an adult education perspective, I think everything that Elaine said, I would concur with 100%. And the only things I just might add is that, from an adult education point of view, this transcript is acceptable to colleges. I mean, many of the HSE, of course, transcripts are as well. But the military, for example, often requires a diploma. Which makes this a particularly useful thing because of the presence of the interest in the armed forces in New Mexico. And I also think, from the perspective, again, of adult education, those students that we have with test anxiety, with learning differences of various types, this is an option for them that I think will be welcome and accommodating to some of their learning. So that also, I think, is really speaks for the NEDP. I wondered if, Mitch, if you had anything to add as well.
I think you both summed it up really well. I mean, as we went through the process, we were looking to cast as wide of a net as possible to capture as many candidates as possible into a program that might not fit the normal pathway. So, this really does fit the bill for a lot of adults out there. I love the comment from Elaine about the need for parents to be enrolled in this. This also provides an opportunity for young parents to help their children with academic skills because they're not only modeling what we want our kids to be doing, but they're also going through the academic piece themselves. So I think that, the only other point that I would make is that while we were going through the state approval process and meeting with everybody, we did meet with the workforce boards. Both the 4 regions as well as the state. Yolanda was 100% supportive of this program. We also met with employers who said that this is something that they would be interested in bringing out to their employees as an option in a partnership. And we also met with community-based and faith-based organizations. So the buy-in for a program like this was broad across the state. And I think each of the different partners that we spoke with had a different perspective and from a different lens on how this program really met the clients that they work with, be it on the workforce side, the employer side, the faith-based, the community-based organizations. Really has that broader appeal because it does bring people back into the academic pipeline.
Thanks very much, Mitch. One moment. Yes. Another thing I wanted to mention is that we're developing a strategy for the implementation of the NEDP that keeps access and equity in mind across the state. And that's something that we're going to try to implement from the very beginning and try to build it in such a way that access and this value of equity that underlies it is sustained over time. And I think part of that is the fact that we have a very diverse state and also a very rural state. And a rural population should have just as much access to the NEDP and all of the services that we provide as our city-based population. So with that in mind, we're thinking about how to use PEDs, regions and priorities that they have identified throughout the state as a way to organize where we prioritize first NEDP programs in New Mexico. Elaine, could you say a little bit about those regions?
Absolutely, thank you. So when the federal funding that pays for career technical education in New Mexico is called the Carl Perkins funding, and in 2019, the law was rewritten in some significant ways. And one of the things that it forced upon us at the PD was that the CTE funding had to become well aligned with the community's needs. And So as part of that shift from one version of the law to the next version of the law, my team, my staff engaged with the Department of Workforce Solutions, Economic Development, and also Higher Ed, who all three have different maps about how to break up the state. And so there's 4 workforce boards, there's 7 economic regions, and there's north of 20 different geographical areas that are on the higher ed map for what community college serves what community. And so my team put together we had a bunch of maps on the wall, and we tried to decide how to break up the state. And what we ended up deciding was that there wasn't any map that really served the educational needs when you were trying to think about the relationship between school districts and the economic communities in which they're embedded. And so we ended up kind of taking a hybrid of all of those partner maps and coming up with this map here, which is called the CTE region map. And in particular, I'll just point out to you Region D and Region E. Region D being Albuquerque itself, and Region E, that sage color, being the communities, the school districts in particular around Albuquerque that workforce data shows the people who live in those communities typically flow into Albuquerque for work and flow back out of Albuquerque into the community for the rest of their living, their school, their children's school, their faith organizations, their grocery store shopping. All of that is in the community, but the work itself is in the metropolitan area. So each of these regions has different economic needs and a different economic profile. And the other thing that I just want to share briefly with you is the 9 through 12 enrollment, because you also get a sense by looking at this enrollment that the geographical size of the different regions is not necessarily well correlated with the size of the school population. And while this is my 9-12 enrollment, it probably provides us with a little bit of an indication of how many adults in any community might need the services of the NEDP, because we know that graduation rates, let's say that they're 75%, 78% across the state. You're going to have in Region A 75% of that year after year. So 25% of that 12,000 is the pipeline of adults who may need the external diploma at some point as they become adults. I want all 12,000 of these kids to graduate from high school. That is what I do every day. But the regional layout is useful for thinking about how we can administer this program.
Thanks very much, Elaine. And to Elaine's points, we really want to use that CTE map that Elaine just showed us as we think about which of the programs that apply for funding in this next fiscal year, which of those we're going to make sure we prioritize so that we get the coverage. So as you'll see in the application, when those of you who are interested take a look at it, we are interested in your knowledge about the NEDP, your level of interest among the students that you serve, and many other factors. But we're also really interested in where you are in the state and whether you'll be able to provide this access and fulfill this real commitment we have to giving equitable access to the NEDP across the state, as we do for other things as well. Another way that we hope to be able to encourage access and equity in the use of the NEDP is the use of an online hub. We've entered into a contract with Margaret, and we're going to with CASAS, Margaret, Janita, and Mitch, excuse me. And I've been talking to Margaret a lot. lately, for an all online hub in this first year, so that even as programs get up, get going, get trained, and we start to build them across the state, there will also be an all online option for students. And I wondered if anyone from NEDP wanted to talk just a little bit about that, from an access perspective. I think Janita, maybe.
Yes.
Sure. So the idea of a hub is that any underserved or unserved populations within the state would have an NEDP home. It would be entirely remote, but it would be staffed by NEDP advisor assessors who could serve clients. Let's say that your agency is interested in NEDP, but might not be able to get it up and running this year. Anyone you had in your student population who you think might be a good candidate could work on NEDP through the remote hub entirely remotely. And that way we are able to offer this program to every adult learner in New Mexico, regardless of whether their local region is offering NEDP this year or not.
Excellent, thank you. Now, moving into talking about how you apply. One thing to think about I know there's a lot of different kinds of programs on this webinar today among the folks who have signed up. And one thing I think it's important to reflect on is, how you ascertain if you're ready to become an NEDP site. And Margaret and Mitch, I wonder if you'd speak to that.
I will let Margaret take the lead on that one. But she's on mute.
I'm sorry, my computer decided to black out for a moment. Am I off mute now?
Yes.
We can hear you. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. We would like for agencies to think about NEDP as another option to be offered, not to replace any option that is presently being offered, but a look at your own program in terms of what clients or what students do you think now are really not being served. So are seem to be frustrated or seem to be in a cycle, or looking at populations that might benefit from NEDP. So I think the first thing to think about in starting to plan for NEDP implementation would be to make a scan of your population, your student population, and doing a data analysis to see what clients or what students seem to be scoring in the higher areas, but really haven't been successful to go on to completion. And even looking back in a prior year or so at client scores where they would seem to be scoring high on your intake instruments, but didn't go to completion. So making sure that you can see that there's a group there that's ready to go. And then also looking at the energy that to pull together a program and to go forward with a new message for your students and for your community. I would also think that it's really important in looking at putting a new program in place is looking at the partners that you might be able to bring together, your workforce partners who might be offering training programs, but who have a population that needs a high school diploma before they can go forward with their training programs. Looking at large employers who have professional development offerings that they could incorporate a high school diploma into these professional offerings. So looking at building partnerships so that you can start to spread the strength that you have in your educational program to identify those who are most in need and who can most benefit from offering NEDP.
And I would add in, just to give a nod to what Elaine mentioned before about Perkins funded CTE programs. We work with states now where a student can enroll in a CTE program as an adult, but they can't get a license at the end of the program without a high school diploma. So enrollment is okay, but they can't actually get an employable job and have family sustainable income until they complete that diploma. So we're working with states on doing NEDP as a dual enrollment program. So for example, in California, if you're doing your pharmacy technician CTE, you're also doing NEDP, and then you get your licensure at the end by completing both. So I would encourage you to take a look at what requirements there are within New Mexico for licensure out of CTE as an option for dual enrollment.
And our most successful implementing programs really have found that there is a need in the communities. Students who have trouble with going to a lot of hours of classroom a day, but who need a high school diploma. Students who have test issues, but who need a high school diploma. Identifying the need, I think, encourages a program to develop the program to serve that need. I would also like to say, and this was a question that I just saw, it takes, we have seen based on our experiences, 6 to 9 months for a client to go all the way through the program as an average to completion. We know some students can do it in a much shorter time, but 6 to 9 months is a good way to think of how long it would take a student to go through the program.
And just to add on to that, Margaret, with the data we've been looking at recently, we've been able to narrow down the amount of hours it's actually taking in the program, you know, like a clock time model. There's not a requirement for a certain amount of hours. It's all based on demonstration of mastery, but the average is about 130 hours. So I've been presenting this to potential clients lately as kind of let's figure the math out backwards from 130 hours. If you can do 10 hours a week, you could probably finish in about, 13 weeks. Oh gosh, I can't do the math. But I think that's a good way to look at it. The amount of time you have to spend on it, the amount of time you can give it really determines how long it's going to take you to finish it.
Thanks, Margaret, Mitch and Janita. I'm sorry, Mitch, I see you're unmuted. Do you have anything else to add? Okay, great. Okay, so I want to make it clear that now that the NEDP is authorized in New Mexico, any program can go ahead and start the process of looking into becoming a site for NEDP. And you can do that by contacting us here at the New Mexico Higher Education Department, or contacting Margaret Kirkpatrick at the NEDP process. However, like I mentioned, we're lucky to have an appropriation from the legislature to begin this implementation process. And if you're interested in applying for those funds, the application process is short and sweet. You can go to the HED website, and I'll show it here. And Tina, I don't know if you're able to post it in the Q&A or someplace to show people, but I'm going to, we'll give the URL at the end as well. But let me share my screen. Here. Can you all see it? You can see the HED website now?
Yes, we can see it.
Yes.
Okay. Wonderful. Okay. So you can get to this by going to hed.state.nm.us and just go into the students and parents tab. And under that, you'll see adult education. And if you go to adult education, you'll see the National External Diploma Program here. You can get it there, or you can go directly to the URL. We'll provide you in the chat or the Q&A. But here, you can scroll down and you'll see 3 things. An information packet you can download from the NEDP to give you a lot more information, many things you've learned here, maybe a little bit more information about the NEDP. There's also a really handy self-assessment worksheet developed by the NEDP. So if you want to think through with your board or with other organizations or people in your organization about whether the NEDP is right for your organization at this time, you can complete this worksheet. And there's also then the application. This application is, I'll see if I can even open it and show you if you're able to see it. It's quite short. There's a little information here at the beginning, and then a 2-page application. So that's it, but it asks for a lot of information about your program and helps you think through the process. Here, let me stop sharing. Today is May 4th. We're asking folks to turn in the application to the email address on the application by June 3rd. That gives you just about a month to make these decisions and get started so that we know who we're working with when the new fiscal year begins. Like I had mentioned, we entered into a contract with CASAs to help us administer this in this first year. So in addition to the hub, we're able to pay most of the expenses for the first year of implementation for 12 programs around the state. And so, like I mentioned, the criteria we're going to use are the information, of course, provided in the application, and also the program's location within the state. So that is basically it in a nutshell. If you're interested in applying now. However, you may be listening and thinking, this is something that we may want to consider in the future. We may, if the legislature appropriates funding in the next fiscal year, again, we may want to apply then. So as you think through that, I wanted to see, we're a little bit over time, but I wondered if Margaret or Janita might say a few words about building an NEDP program over time.
Well, a program is one of the things that we know about NEDP client graduates, as well as all adult education students, is that they are bombarded with a lot of information, but where they really get information that they trust is from other students, right? Other graduates. So we find programs build over time, and they do build very strongly over time. And we really find that some of the most effective building happens when our graduates become part of the ongoing strength of the program, and the graduates speak, and people see their brothers and their in-laws and their neighbors and their classmates being successful. So building a program over time it starts relatively slowly because of the kind of training that happens. We spend a lot of time working with all of our trainees to make sure that the program makes a lot of sense to you, that you understand how it works, that you can be successful early and continually. So programs start with our trainees having 1 or 2, at most 3 clients beginning, and then building on from that. But a slow and steady growth really encourages students who see success, who see incremental success, that they can share that good news with their community and with their students. And then it starts to build from within. And that seems to be a really solid way to build the program. Janita, would you like to add to that?
No, that's a really good point. The only other thing I would say is that we think of new NEDP providers as being emerging programs that need a lot of support from us. We're doing your first portfolio review. We're really holding your hands all the way through your first clients, each trainee's first client. Once you get through that point, word starts to spread, you're more knowledgeable about the program, you have a better sense of what it really means, what it really looks like. And that's kind of when, after the first review, the deluge, right? That's kind of when, all of your learners are going to come out and your database and want to do NEDP. So just know that as you're emerging as a new agency, as you're training and working with your first clients, you have a lot of support from our office.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Well, we want to get on to the questions and answers, and I see there's already been a lot in the Q&A. I know that folks have been working to try to answer some of those. I want to walk us through that now, but I just wanted to share for a little while this contact slide. If you can jot this information down, it gives you the URL for the New Mexico Higher Education Department where you can access that application. It also gives a general email address where you can ask for more information. All of my contact information is here, and Margaret's contact information is here. So you can jot these down real quick. I wasn't sure if they were able to be shared yet in this webinar format. So I'm going to leave this up for just a moment before we go on to the Q&As, or as we go on to the Q&As. Let's see here. I'm seeing some questions from Mr. Acosta about Spanish options for the NEDP. Can someone from the NEDP speak to that?
NEDP is offered only in English. The assessment, the CASAS can be, that is also in English. So we do not at this time have a Spanish option or another language option.
Thank you. And I see a question from Jacob Pacheco, who asks, in states where the NEDP is currently active, what is the approximate percentage of individuals that need a high school diploma that earn it through the NEDP? Great question.
That's a good question, and one whose answer I do not know. But what I can tell you is our graduation rate, which is about 55 to 60%. And that's of everyone who starts the program, you know, even at the beginning, everyone who's an enrolled client, about 55 to 60% will end up graduating.
And I can chime in on that. When you talk about state graduation rates, that data can be pulled from the census. It's really more important to look at local American Community Survey data when you're looking at graduation rates at the local level, which will give you a better sense of how the localities of the K-12s are dealing with their graduations, then pushing people into the adult ed pipeline.
Thanks. And I see another question from Mr. Acosta about how this compares or complements the capstone process and PED. And I think, Elaine, are you responding to that, or would you like to?
Sure. The capstone process is a PED initiative to try to add a level of cultural sensitivity and culturally responsive instruction to the process, and also provide options for students, again, who may not be well suited to standardized testing. As it currently stands, the capstone is one of many ways that a student can demonstrate competency. I would say that the example that we saw of the applying geography, applying an understanding of the economic impact of a region to a geographical feature of a community in which one lives is very much the sort of assignment that you should see in a high school capstone project. And from that perspective, I would say that they are at least analogous, although I don't think that New Mexico's development of capstone rubrics is as sophisticated as what our friends at NEDP have developed for evaluation and for assuring rigorous quality in the response. So I actually would say that the capstone communities probably would be able to use what we've seen from NEDP to model some of the assessments that we might use for capstones.
Thanks very much. And just a quick note here to make sure folks understand that we're answering open questions as they go, but also everyone on the panel are carefully answering questions as well. So if you have some questions, you might find the answers under the answered tab at the top of your Q&A. Another question that I think is still live is, and I don't know if anyone at the panel has this information or whether we'll have to get back to Mr. Acosta, but does enrollment fulfill DACA requirements for students? Is anyone aware of that?
So I'll chime in on that if
Okay.
I may. DACA is really state policy and how the state implements the federal DACA requirements. So as a program leading to a diploma, NEDP is not involved in that. That would be a state policy.
Got it. Thank you. Someone asks, how many years will this RFA cover? If we feel that this year might not be good, will we have another chance next year to apply? Good question. So the answer is we don't know. This is a non-recurring appropriation that we got from the legislature to implement the an adult diploma program. So it's not guaranteed that these funds will be available next year. If they are, we will continue down this path. Well, I'm sure we'll learn lessons and we'll tweak the process, but we will again use the funds in order to support local programs. But we don't know if the money is going to return next year. We sure hope that it does. Again, I should mention though that if your organization has the funds, outside funds, grant funds, et cetera, you can go ahead with this. You don't need our funds or our blessing in order to move forward with this. But if you want to apply for the funds, and that comes from that application comes to AGP.
And Amber, correct me if I'm out of line, but I believe that WIOA funds can be used for this because it is approved by Octave.
Yeah, I believe that's the case as well, although I think that comes down to a local board decision. But yes, generally speaking, I think that would be something to definitely bring up with the local board. Okay, another question that we're having, would workforce boards, local workforce one-stop job centers, qualify to apply to become an NEDP site? Margaret, I know you're typing an answer, but do you have an answer to that?
From the NEDP rules, and this is, with their own funding, they certainly could be a provider because they have the option to provide the state diploma. So that's usually the, in a state where there is not a state diploma, then workforce boards, or as I said, employers, anyone who would have a real option to offer this would need to collaborate with a school in order to give a diploma. In New Mexico, there is the state diploma. The staff does not have to be teachers. As I said, it is not an instructional program. The requirement for staff is that they have a 4-year degree. So, and workforce boards and certainly local one-stops would be staffed that way. So yes, workforce boards could be NEDP providers.
And just to add on to that, when we were setting the stage for this, all 4 of the regions were very excited to have this and were interested in being partners. So I encourage people to reach out to your local boards as well as the state board.
Excellent, thank you. Isabel asks, when does each course start, or how many courses each year are there?
And the program, once it's implemented at the site, then it's an individual, an NEDP staff person working with the individual client. So there's not really a start time. It's a 12-month available program. The NEDP program is always up, it's always going. So this then becomes the scheduling for each program.
And the competency areas are as close to a course as you're going to get in NEDP, and there are 8 of them. And remember that the client just works on 1 or 2 at a time. And how long those competency areas take really depends on how much time the client has to give to the work, how many times things need to be reattempted to get to 100% mastery.
Thanks. Does your staff, do the staff at programs that apply need to be accredited or licensed as NEDP assessors?
And they need, all NEDP staff will be trained through the NEDP training process and meet all of the training requirements. Janita, can you speak to the number of hours that the training requires?
Sure. The training is a combination of in-person and asynchronous. And we're looking about a total of 20 hours per trainee, and that includes certification to give CASAS tests. It includes about 13 hours of live face-to-face training. Usually we do that over Zoom if we can find a way to come to you. I've never been to New Mexico and I would love to come and see you all. But everything we train you to do, you'll be able to practice in the T-Trainer website. So about 7 hours of that 20 will be spent asynchronously, independently, just practicing what you've learned.
Thanks. So I think that answers James' next question about the time that it takes. And that's actually something that I remember was a question that I first had. Does I think you may have said this already, but let's just reiterate. Does the NEDP staff that you have in your local program, do they need to be 100% dedicated to the NEDP, or can they do other things as well?
Oh, this is adult ed. Nobody's 100% dedicated to
Correct.
any job. No, most of our staff do other things.
Uh-huh.
They're
Excellent.
teaching an HSE class, they're counselors, they're doing other things.
Yeah, adult ed is synonymous with other duties as assigned.
Thank you. That's the right answer. Thank you. And I saw one question that we've actually answered. And again, I'll tell people to consider looking in the answered tab to see if there are other questions that you'd like to see answered. But one I saw that I think someone answered already before I got to it was about, if we decide not to apply this year, is the online hub still going to be available? And the answer is yes. The hub is going forward. We will be able to serve students through the hub. However, there's a limited number of spaces that we have available right now in the hub. Correct me if I'm wrong, Margaret, but I believe we have 40. For this
I
first
think it
year.
was 30, but I haven't looked
Okay.
at it lately. I'm sorry.
Somewhere between 30 and 40. So as you know, it's not a huge number. We use the funds that we could to get as many seats as we can. So it's going to take a combination of the hub plus hopefully local agencies to apply to be NEDP providers throughout New Mexico in order to be able to serve as many people as we hope to be able to serve. And of course, we plan to be growing over the course of the next few years. I'm not seeing any additional questions right now. I know that there's two that open that are being answered by Margaret, and I think that we've just answered ourselves. So if you have any further questions, please make sure to drop those in the chat, in the Q&A, excuse me. Margaret, while we're waiting, Margaret, Mitch, Janita, or Elaine, do you have any further comments you'd like to make?
There was another thing I wanted to make sure that we shared, which is that we have a trained agency in New Mexico now, and that's Albuquerque Charter Academy. So they just finished training. They're working with their first set of clients. If you want to talk about what's the process like, how are you identifying your clients, how is this working for you? How are you making it work? That would be a great group of folks to talk with.
And I would just like to say again that I'm going to be at the New Mexico conference. I'll be there to answer questions, to meet with anybody who would like to talk about, what would it look like in terms of training? What would I need to do in order to set it up? Please come and look for me. I'll be at a table, a CASAS table. Should be in the vendor room with a CASAS table.
Thank you very much. Any other further comments? All right. I don't see any further comments. I don't see any further questions. So I think our time here is done. Thank you everyone for participating. I'd like to mention that this PowerPoint and the recording of this webinar will both be posted on the HED website. And I believe that in the chat, Tina Height put the direct link to that page, so it's not hard to find. I'll just reiterate that it's you can find it also by just going to hed.state.nm.us and finding the adult education page. And we're right there front and center on a button at the top. You can click and find all the information right there. So we appreciate everyone being here. I want to thank all of our panelists for taking the time to talk with us today and to prepare for this. And hope that a lot of folks get their applications in. If you have any questions at all, please reach out to us. We're happy to answer. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.